In March 2018, a quiet cathedral city known for little more than housing the late Prime Minister Edward Heath became the stage for one of the most brazen state-sponsored attacks in Europe since the Cold War. Sergei Skripal, a former Russian intelligence officer turned MI6 double agent, and his daughter Yulia were poisoned in Salisbury with novichok, a nerve agent developed for battlefield use. This was not only an operation to kill a defector. A newly published public inquiry confirms that this was always likely. Vladimir Putin personally authorized the attack and to send a message of power, vengeance, and impunity. And the inquiry, led by Lord Hughes, concluded that the decision to strike on British soil, inevitably triggering diplomatic retaliation, sanctions, and global condemnation, could only have come from the top. The Kremlin wanted to demonstrate that no oath of loyalty is ever forgiven if broken. Even a presidential pardon counts for nothing before Russian power. This was political theatre pursued with deadly toxins. Yet what stands out most is not the intended target. Skripal and his daughter survived thanks to a rapid intervention by local medical teams. The darkest consequences were reserved for those who had nothing to do with the espionage or the statecraft. A discarded perfume bottle, carelessly dumped by the assassins as if disposing of a sandwich wrapper, containing enough novichok to kill thousands. 4 months later, Dawn Sturgis, a mother of 3, sprayed it on her wrists, believing it to be scent. She died within days. Her partner, Charlie Rowley, survived, but with lifelong damage. The inquiry is explicit. The agents can have had no regard for the hazard thus created. That sentence encapsulates the moral character of Putin's methods. This was a weapon designed to kill silently, indiscriminately. It arrived in the United Kingdom on a commercial flight. It was carried through public streets. It contaminated parks, homes, emergency services, a restaurant, and a city centre. 87 people presented to A&E. Nick Bailey, a police officer simply doing his duty, will suffer the consequences for the rest of his life. This attitude to collateral damage is not an accident. It's a feature of a regime that rewards ruthlessness, that treats its own servicemen as expendable in Ukraine, that considers considers the people in a foreign country as little more than props in its narrative of strength. The message is simple. Russia acts where it wants, against whom it wants, regardless of the consequences. The withered hand stretches out from within the Smeg fridge. And who it touches, who knows? The claim that the attackers were innocent tourists admiring Salisbury Cathedral's famous spire will go down as one of the more absurd propaganda moments of the past decade. You don't admire the size of the spire, you admire the fact that it was painted by Constable 3 times. The truth, backed by overwhelming evidence, includes surveillance footage, meticulous forensic tracing of the nerve agent, and a clear operational trail going back to the GRU. These men were decorated operatives acting on orders. Dawn Sturgis's family is right to demand that lessons be learned. It remains troubling that Skripal lived openly under his real name, on the electoral roll, with limited ongoing security assessments. Although the inquiry insists the state's calculations were reasonable at the time, the painful reality is that these vulnerabilities created the condition for tragedy. Britain behaved like an amateur. And yet one must keep focus where it belongs. As the report makes clear, the British state didn't spray novichok onto a door handle, it didn't stuff a weapon of mass death into a perfume bottle, it didn't turn street bins into potentially fatal hazards. This was not the conscious choice of a foreign leader. This was not the conscious choice of our leaders. This was the conscious choice of a foreign leader who saw murder as a form of messaging. Putin bears moral responsibility for this disaster, not only for the attack itself, but for the casual disregard of human life that defines his rule. If we want to know what's going on in Ukraine, we need to look no further than the Skripal story. From apartment block bombings in Russia to the bombing of hospitals in Mariupol, there is a pattern. Civilians exist only to be intimidated into submission or written off as collateral to a greater cause, the cause of Putin's domination, the cause of Putin's reach from the Smeg fridge. Salisbury was not a failure of British intelligence. It was an attack on the civilized assumption that ordinary people should be safe in their own streets. It was a violation of international norms, so extreme that the use of a chemical warfare agent has now become part of the Kremlin's repertoire. You only have to talk to the family of... now I've suddenly forgotten his name, and I know him. Anyway. the fellow detained in prison, who then died. As the Prime Minister observed, this was an astonishingly reckless act, posing an entirely foreseeable risk to innocence. Dawn Sturgis was not a combatant in any combat, in any conflict. She was a victim of a regime that believes fear is the currency of power. We honour her not only by remembering the injustice of her death, but by refusing to accept the moral logic behind it. Democracies must show that strength doesn't require cruelty, that legitimacy is not earned by terrorizing bystanders, and that accountability remains the greatest threat to any tyrant. It's a threat that Navalny, there I've got his name finally, Alexei Navalny sustained with the same pressures, with the same nerve agent in all likelihood. Salisbury was meant to demonstrate Russian might. Instead, it exposed the insecurity of a leader who must silence defectors to feel strong, who has to have multiple doppelgangers to feel safe, who may or may not be dead. Who knows? Who cares? A man who views human life as disposable. Justice, in the legal sense, may take time or even prove impossible, but the verdict of history about President Putin has been clear for a long time and is already clear now. Putin is a monster.